It is 4 o'clock. I'm guessing other people will dribble in, but we're going to go ahead and get started and be respectful of people's time, because that is how the board rolls, right? That's how we try to roll. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Dyson, and hopefully you can sit. I kind of like to stand, but she will take the first few slides.
Yes, so I have the pleasure of welcoming you to the board information session and orientation. We are going to stay like right up at 30,000 feet for the orientation, and once folks are elected, then we have a deeper dive into the orientation, because then you'll really need to know all of the particulars. So tonight, I'm welcoming you here to our boardroom. We're going to review the role of board members and examine 4 primary responsibilities of the board members. And then there are some places where Dr. Sergo and I are going to just jump in just to talk about, from a staff perspective, some of the things that you might need to know. And then we are done. So I think we're about less than an hour in. We'll take your questions at the end. This is not me.
I'm sorry, this is slide 3. I was
Yes.
saying this is 2.
Yes.
I apologize. Right. So these are really the key points to remember. We were laughing before that when any of us have gone to our state. I was at MABE, is our state organization. They do a great training. And they kind of say, remember all these things you promised when you were campaigning? You can't do any of them. So it's like, these are the key points to remember, is what can the board actually do. So the board sets policy. That's the direction. We'll say to the superintendent, this is what we would like to see happen. Hi. We're just getting started.
Yep.
So come on in,
Have a
sit down.
seat anywhere you like.
Sit with my friend Dee.
And I apologize. I'm Karen Yoho.
How are
I'm
you?
longest of this group on the board, my 8th year, final. And I'm not super happy about that. I don't mean to sound like I'm happy about it. I chose not to run, so I'm looking forward to having more time, but I am going to miss the board. I've loved my service. I was asked to do this today since current board candidates shouldn't be running this meeting, so that's why. And I was previously president and have run it before. So this is what we're talking about, what the board does, and that Dr. Dyson had said, this is a 30,000-foot view, because your heads will get so filled with information, and after the election, you'll have plenty of time, lots of more training, and really get to know the personnel. So what the board can do, we set policy, we set direction, we say to the superintendent, this is what we would like to see happen, and we have oversight. So a little question, how many employees does the Board of Education have? In Frederick County, I should say.
1, Dr. Dyson.
You're very close, she is. We also have Catherine Rich, and we have an ombuds, Sabrina Nail.
They technically are FCPS employees. So if something was to ever happen to their jobs, we'd owe them another job. So the superintendent is technically the only employee completely hired by the board.
But we do the evaluations of those 3, so.
Star for you.
So very good. The superintendent runs the school system, the day-to-day operations. That is the superintendent's purview. And what our state organization would say is, if we try to do that, we can't evaluate her. Okay? So if we want to be able to evaluate her, let her do her job, we stay in our lane. Individual board members do not direct staff or schools. Okay? And authority exists only when the board acts as a body. As an individual board member, you have no power. And I think everybody's aware you need a majority, and in our case with 7 members, it is the 4 votes typically, unless that gets into a technicality. We'll just go with the majority, okay? So this is a lot of stuff here. Hello, no, come on in, Nathan, have a seat anywhere. So we're just talking about what the board actually does, and it's sort of limited. Still a lot, but it's got very specific. So I'll just kind of pick out. We always want to keep the students at the center of everything we do. Why are we here if it's not for the students? This is from the National School Board Code of Ethics, but we should always keep the students in mind. That may sound silly, but you'll hear things all the time of people talking to one constituent group or another. It always should be about the student. So the education and well-being. Integrity and representation. So you should act honestly, avoid conflicts of interest, and there's a whole bunch with conflicts of interest. You will have to do financial reports. I think you've already had to do that to even run. And just always making sure, like, all my thing was always don't show up on the front page of the paper for a bad reason. And you're not here for your personal gain. I don't think anybody in school board world is really there. They make a lot of money and all that. Some people will use it as a stepping stone, and that's different from people getting here and realizing maybe they want to do something else, maybe what they wanted to do they can't really do on the board. We've had members, but if this is only a stepping stone for somebody, that's not the right reason to run. Again, that idea of collective governance, this was on a previous screen. I think, Nathan, you might have missed that you have no power as an individual board member. It's as a collective, the majority rules. Okay, confidentiality. I'm constantly having to think, all right, is this something somebody said in a public meeting that I can talk about, or was this during closed session? Because if it was closed session and you talk about it, that is a major no-no, and you can get really, I think even the state board would be mad at you for that. So confidentiality, even though we have open meetings and we try to do as much as we can in public, we are still privy to some private things, especially if it's with staff or students. So confidentiality is very important. Professional conduct. You'll see our board, you all have been around. We don't all agree on the topics and the subjects and the motions. We try to still get along and be cordial. Back there in the room during dinner, we have conversation. We ask about each other's kids and grandkids and pets. And Jamie Brennan's helped me with some QuickBooks issues for my husband's company. So, you try to strike up those connections and try to work with people and get to know them as people. And then, you never know what kind of coalitions, like, oh, we agree on this, and maybe work on those together. And again, the operational limits. Board members focus on policy making and oversight rather than daily operations in schools. And that can be really, really tough. That can be really tough, especially when you're starting. We're going to do questions, if you don't mind, at the end. So, compliance, board members must abide by state laws and regulations governing education. And that's another thing that can be frustrating for new board members. They don't realize how much. I was at the state board meeting yesterday. They did 4 sets of COMAR that they passed for different things, some for publication, for comment, some for actually, for put out for comment period, others were to be published. We've been trying to advise them from MABE. We don't always like what they do, but we have to abide. So MSDE, the State Board, and the Accountability and Implementation Board, AIB, those are some of our masters, and we must do what they want us to do. Somebody came up to me recently and said, well, can't you get ahead of something? It's like, oh, you mean break the law? That's not getting ahead. That would be like breaking the law. So no, we cannot do that. Jump in if it's your slide.
You have one more.
One more, okay. Hi, Maria, come on.
Hi, sorry for being. Hi, thank you.
So, I'm not sure, for people that have come in late,
Kind of went over some of this, but this is going to set us up nicely for the
Okay.
next.
There's
Good.
another slide.
Okay, good. So we're Maria, we're just kind of reviewing and sort of trying to drill in a few key things. This is a 30,000-foot view because, there's a lot more to learn for the people that actually go on to get elected, so we don't want to fill your heads too much. So we're kind of repeating some things. All right, so here's the 4 primary areas of responsibility. We've really already talked about them in some ways. The policymaker. Negotiations and appointments. Our board does something that a lot of boards don't do. We have members sit in as observers only during negotiations meetings. And that happened a few years ago to, thank you, Catherine, to restore trust. There had been some trust that things that happened and sides weren't trusting each other. So that was kind of decided on, and I think it's worked well. We're sitting there, we hear They know we hear, and, but we keep quiet. We're there to listen as observers. Financial stewardship, you're all aware of the budget. I know you're well aware of that part. And so, we decide to some extent, mostly as a lump sum, some of the pieces, a few years ago when grade music was going to be cut, Mr. Rose suggested we raise athletic fees to be able to keep that program. So we have some kind of flexibility in there, but we take a lot of direction from the people who deal with it every day, Ms. Claybaugh and the financial department, under the direction of the superintendent. And then this is what I was talking about with confidentiality, where this comes in, adjudicating body. I love it, we're quasi-judicial. So we hear appeals. If something happens, their child was, say, suspended, or a teacher had an action against them, or lots of different things, and they don't like the superintendent or her designee's decision, they can appeal it to us. And there are different ways that we hear appeals, so.
So just by way of formal introduction, I'm Dr. Sarah Sergo. I serve as the Chief of Staff for Frederick County Public Schools. And in my role, I also oversee the Human Resources Department. So I also oversee the Public Affairs team and coordinate Maryland Blueprint. So I have my tentacles in sort of a bunch of different places. But I'm also the primary liaison to the board. And so on behalf of the superintendent, I serve as her designee on most appeal and grievance matters, and sort of also am the primary person who keeps the board informed, whether it be, I think yesterday I sent you a couple emails. One was about the water issues we had in Urbana, and it might be about an accident. It might be about sort of other issues that are happening at different levels. So I'm the primary liaison between the superintendent and the board. These are just some things we like to sort of elevate about our organizational culture that I think is important because it really characterizes who we are and how we try to operate. One of the things is that we do have norms inside of the organization around our communication, and so sort of the importance of protecting people's personal and work life. So we really try not to do business either with the board or with each other after 6 o'clock, and we don't do it on the weekends. There are, of course, at the level of which we're working, there are obvious exceptions to that, and so the superintendent often has a meeting with the board 7 days a week, board leadership specifically. But really in terms of norms, it's always good to go into it to know that that's what we try to abide by. So when we get emails from board members or from community members, that are after hours, they get responded to by the next business day, or if it's on a weekend, it'll be on a Monday. It's just important to know that that's one of our norms.
Well, can I just say
please,
that one
yeah.
of the things I did as a part of my entry into Frederick County Public Schools was I hosted 5 sessions in Brunswick, Catoctin, Urbana, several others. And I asked people to fill out, what do you love about the system? And if you could change anything, what would you change? Communication was one, clear structures was another, and then the other one was work-life balance. And so while we've not perfected it, we are much better than we were before. And teachers and staff will remind me, sometimes they'll send me little notes to say, my supervisor is still sending notes after 6 p.m. And, and so we try to we do it to be courteous. I want people to come to work refreshed. I want people to know that they could go to their child's baseball game or their grandchild's baseball game, and that we can pick work up that's not an emergency when we come back. And so we are on a good track for that. I think in my board comments next week, you will see, as Ms. Yoho talked about, there are several masters that we are trying to please at the same time. So I'm going to put a chart up next week just to talk about all of the mandatory requirements on the instructional side that we are required to do over the next several years that I can't take away. We cannot as a system, you cannot as a board take away because they're required by AIB, by MSDE, or the state board. And I think
I didn't even mention the legislature that just did a
Correct.
whole slew of bills,
Correct. So this work-life balance is really important, but equally important is understanding what's non-negotiable from all of the other people that we answer to. Thank you.
And so I think to build on that around communication channels, a lot of board members have either individual constituencies which they represent, or they're connected to school communities because of their own history in those communities or where they live. And so we know that a lot of times people will lean on those relationships and ask of you, hey, I'm having this issue, and so even though we sort of people broadly understand that the board does not run the day-to-day operations of schools or the system, we know that you want to be armed with information to provide the community with the support they're looking for, information or response. So one of the things that we try to honor and do collectively, and the board does this really well, is that when you have information requests, or let's say you get an email from an individual and it's just to you, but you'd like the superintendent or our team to sort of address it, you pretty much forward that and copy the full board. We try to copy each other on everything. And so you would always be sort of sending those forward to the superintendent, you acknowledge them. There are some norms that the board would get into once someone is elected. The board handbook really dictates that if it's a collective message, the board president is the one to respond. But overall, we just sort of say, funnel everything to the superintendent so she can sort of farm it out to who will coordinate that response. We try to do same day, if not 24-hour responses to anybody. In terms of school-based communication, one of the things that's a request, frankly, of our staff that we want to honor is that if you have a desire to sort of go to a school or attend a school visit, that the superintendent and public affairs teams coordinates that. Because our principals and our teachers don't want to say no to you, right? They want you to come, they want you to see their work. And so they do ask that we help with that, and we've made an agreement that we would do so, and they love it. And so as the board knows, they can go to any school they'd like, but we do try to coordinate those visits on their behalf so that it doesn't disrupt what's going on. Maybe they have testing, maybe the principal's out of the building, whatever it might be. Right. IEP meetings, whatever it might be. And sometimes we get requests from elected officials that might want to come for different reasons, and those things are also coordinated through the public affairs team. So we provide that support to make sure that the board can fulfill its desires, its interests, and its obligations. The next slide is yours, Karen.
Yeah. A couple of things that were just said when, as a previous teacher, I said to Dr. Sergo, yeah, work-life balance, how does that work? What are you doing? And she told me about the emails. I'm like, well, that is an actual thing. And I found as a board member, you know, weekends really are quieter. And so that is working. So, all right, sample board meeting. You've all been to board meetings, so we've seen you all there, so you know what it seems like and how it goes. We try to use Robert's rules. We are, let's see, I'm trying to see.
This was an example.
Oh, I'm sorry, policy. So policy and curriculum and instruction are our board committees that 3 members each sit on. And typically, the first board meeting of the month that morning has been C&I, curriculum and instruction, and the second board meeting of the month is policy. So April, we had 1 month, neither met. And those are the only ones where 3 members sit. Again, it's not a quorum. No actual votes are taken other than on policy committee. The vote is taken by the 3 members. Have a seat wherever you'd like, Heather. You okay there? So the vote, when the policy committee, the 3 members feel it's ready to go to the full board, that's the vote that's taken. No vote whether you're going to pass that policy or what we've just worked on. I think policy 443 we worked on for about 3 policy meetings, at least before we said, okay, now this is ready to go on to the full board. And then it was there for a couple of times. So the work isn't done, but that's the only motion made in policy committee. C&I really don't make motions. Yeah, lots of questions at C&I where the curriculum is presented. The rest of these committees are, we are pretty much liaisons to. The Racial Equity Committee was one that was our board. And Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee is one that the state does mandate. And so that's run a little bit different. Everything else, the OPEB Trust and the IIAA, which I'm not seeing up there, those are with county. Never served on those. I know Mr. Rose does. And so those are group things through the county. Ethics, nobody's on there because, you know, issues that they hear. So, but other than that, there's like 1 liaison to each of those. I think that's about it, yeah, for that.
Can I ask a question about that legal counsel, the chief legal
Yes.
counsel? Who employs him or her?
Superintendent.
The superintendent does
Yeah,
it?
it works for the district.
They work
And
for
then
the
the board
district.
has a separate attorney.
Right.
Who's the gentleman that comes to the
Steve
board?
Blivis.
Steve
He's our
Bliss.
chief legal counsel. He's a member of the superintendent's cabinet.
So does he represent the Board of Education?
No.
And the board has its own attorney.
Superintendent.
Yeah.
He represents
He's the liaison to the policy committee though, so that's why he presents a lot of the policies and things like that. He is the
Right.
liaison, the staff liaison.
Because so many of the policies have legal connections, implications,
Yes.
are affected by legal rulings. So to have a legal person, a lawyer in the room is, you'd have to have that, whether they were the one to lead it, but. he-
Mr. Blivis and I both sit on that as as the superintendent's designees,
And then they bring in other people.
but we're advisory.
Yeah.
His hiring is your decision, Cheryl, right?
Yes, he went through the process though. He went through the hiring process.
Yeah, he's been here for a few years,
Yeah.
How many years?
at least 3.
Three.
And he has 2 other lawyers that are in the legal office with him. Okay.
And who is the Board of Education's lawyer?
We outsource. Our state organization, MABE, has a list of people that know school law. And so when it comes time for and also give you a break in the price. But typically, they're all in Maryland. Yeah, the ones I can think of are all in Maryland. And they work closely with MABE and understand, and the state legislature and state board and all that, they understand all the legal implications. And so then we look at the list. We've had one that we've tended to work with, but other times we've.
What was your question about general counsel? Is that what you asked?
Yes, yes, sorry. Who's the board's attorney? We do not have a standing attorney. We hire outside when we need one.
Is that something, how is that paid for?
Through board funds.
Budget.
Yeah. And those are the kind of things we can get into more. We're keeping this at a 30,000. I know you missed the beginning. We're just trying to keep this at a 30,000 foot. Happy to talk to people afterwards if there are other specific questions, or you can always email the board leadership at any time. But we're going to get quickly through this PowerPoint. So this is a really important one. A couple of these are really important to remember. As a teacher, could I have told you the difference? I thought for years we had a homework policy. No, we have a homework regulation. But for the board and for the public and the school system, these are important. So the policy is the what? That is the board's purview. If you want to think of it, in my mind, what I always said, the most ridiculous thing I said, so I'd remember, if as a board, we wanted to send students to the moon. Obviously ridiculous, that's the what. We say to the superintendent, we got together and a majority of us voted, we want to send students to the moon. It's her job to let us down gently and tell us why that can't happen, or to figure out a way to do it. And if you can keep those 2 rules, that's why I do this ridiculous thing so it sticks in my head. We are the what, the superintendent is the how, we're the policy, they're the regulation. Those just go hand in glove. That, if you take one thing away from this today, that's the most important part. That way you'll know the job that you're running for. You won't be as frustrated. If you get it, you'll know this is what I can do and this is how to do it, because the superintendent's going to do the how of what we want to do.
I think it's important, Ms. Yoho, just to emphasize that the regulations are not approved by the board, and the board has no involvement in writing them or approving them. So we anchor them in policy, so they can move more quickly. We're in a multi-year update of all policies and regulations. We have many that have not been sort of regularly reviewed, let's say. And so we have a schedule that the board policy committee is driving, and we sort of follow them. We're right in tandem with them. So when they update a policy, we go find the corresponding regulation. But we also have some.
There's not one.
Right. We also have some regulations that don't have necessarily a board policy that goes with it. That could be, I don't have a good example off the top of my head, but well, homework's probably connected to overall some academic policy.
Generally, the policy will say,
Superintendent.
direct the superintendent to. So when that happens, we have a corresponding regulation.
I know we're saving questions. It's really quick, I promise. Is there a goal or an effort overall to try to limit or reduce or shrink over time the amount of
Yes.
regulations and policies?
Yes.
through that review?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. We're constantly looking, if you've looked at these in depth, you can find some that are like 2 sentences long.
We've had some interesting.
You have some that haven't been looked at in 20 years. So every time we come on one, we try to collapse things or deactivate them. But, you know, we want to be transparent, because even if it's 2 sentences, it might be 2 sentences that are really important to somebody and have meaning. So we're not haphazard about it, but absolutely. Like, we found one the other day that had to do with, like a fire alarm, or it was like a 2-sentence regulation, and we're like, okay, or policy actually. Wasn't it a policy?
Yes.
It was something.
Fire drill policy.
Fire drill, and we're like, okay, that's gotta go.
Other drills.
Drills, many drills that
And
run.
while there's a clear roadmap for, that's been an effort since I've been here of the board to really start having a cadence about looking at policies, sometimes that gets disrupted because of legislation or because of a change with the state board, which just happened yesterday and in the legislative season. So the board may have to revise it, and then we will come and revise. We have a regulation review committee where we have multiple stakeholders, including community members, and so we will have to revise when the board does.
Sure. Yeah, I was just speaking from coming from the classroom and knowing that those
Yeah, there's
days
so many.
are always the worst, where you're going into for a policy update.
Yeah.
And it just felt like they were constantly building on each other versus moonlighting ones and
Right.
simplifying. So it's good to hear that that's a focus.
Superintendents have their bid for FCPS.
I think when Steve took over the guidance of the policy committee, that number was probably like 93, and now we're down to 86. So we're deactivating policies as we go if they're unnecessary. And I think, as she kind of mentioned really quickly, there's a parent that actually serves on both as a non-voting member of both committees on regulation and policy.
Keep slashing.
Really helpful. Yeah, and just brief history on that. From what I could find, the policy committee only started as a committee in about 2017. Before that, there was facilities and finance or something. And so when you think about it, 2017, that's not even 10 years, and COVID was in the middle. So I was explaining to somebody the other day why with some of these policies, there were always policies, but why some of them haven't been reviewed. But this board, and as you said, Mr. Blevis, they've been very, very earnest and diligent about reviewing the policies. I think we've actually now, over the course of a number of years, gotten through all of them and are back to the 100. So, yeah, and then graduation you have to do every year or something like that. But this is important because the policy committee will hear it first, okay, and review, recommend, discuss ad nauseum. Sometimes public has the right to come in, talk to us, give us direction that they would like to see. Often we do think about the things that they brought into it. When it's gone through the policy committee and we feel like it is ready to go to the whole board, that's when that motion comes up and we send it on a future agenda. At that point, first reading, we do that in the evening to make sure, again, the public is aware and more of them can come. They can look at the agenda, they can send us emails, they can come give public comment. So then it's when the board feels it's ready. That frequently happens. A majority will vote to send it to second reading. Sometimes there are tweaks, sometimes it's just minor edits. On occasion, we might pass it at first reading. Like the graduation policy, I was thinking one that hardly has to be done anything to, but has to be heard every year. That one might pass at first reading. But we usually like to give it time for the public. We don't usually want to rush it. We're never trying to rush it. I want to give that impression. We're always trying to give the public time to see what we're discussing and give us their feedback. Okay? And again, always the full board. So if we don't feel it's ready at second reading, we might, how many times have we ever sent it back to the policy committee? I don't remember a time.
handful.
Maybe
There's
a handful? Okay.
a couple.
So if we think there's, maybe legislation comes in the middle of discussing and say, oh, we gotta, this is, no. It might go back to the policy committee, that's a vote. So you'll see on the agendas, is it information, discussion, action? Those are the three things we can do. Policies will always have actions. That action might be send it back to policy committee, send it for second reading, or pass it. Those are kind of the three actions. But policies will always have action along with information discussion. Okay? Policy adoption, policy becomes effective, and as stated, the superintendent, the regulation committee does their thing.
So one of the things in terms of negotiations, and so as Ms. Yoho shared, there are 4 primary roles that the board members have, and one of them is as the employer. And so the board we have 3 employee labor units. Maryland is a collective bargaining state, so employees have the right to organize and form unions. So we have 3 labor units. We have FACE, which is our support professionals. We have FCTA, which is our certificated staff. People think of this as our teacher unit. And then we have a 3rd unit, which is called FCASA and FCNCS, but essentially these are our certificated and non-certificated administrators and supervisors. You will think of those as like our principals, assistant principals, coordinators, anybody who's in that group. The largest group among the 3 is FCTA and FACE. FCASA and FCNCS is a relatively smaller number. We also have about 100 individuals who are not in any union. And there is a board policy that goes with this. It's policy 319 that explains why. Because we have to prove to the labor world why we have not allowed certain people to join a union, because you're allowed to in the state of Maryland. So there are certain carve-outs that certain employees are not allowed, or we can withhold them from union membership because of the roles they have are either confidential or they're acting on behalf of the board. So for example, my position, I am a non-unit group member. I work very closely with the board. I'm aware of their position in bargaining. I would color my ability to do my job if I was bargaining for the board and also for myself at the same time. So there's about 100 of us. Most of the folks who are not in an employee group are individuals. It's not about level, so it's not like executive leadership. There are administrative assistants, but there are mostly people who are in fiscal services, people who are in our legal services offices, and then people who work as part of the superintendent's cabinet or have access to confidential information that could perhaps influence or inform their ability to do the work on behalf of the board. So as Ms. Yoho talked about in terms of the function around bargaining and how that looks, the board doesn't actually sit at the table with union leaders and bargain. They appoint a bargaining team. So every fall, I bring forward a list of recommended individuals that are in this non-unit group. So my denominator of who I can pick from is within this 100 individuals, because again, can't be in a union to bargain on behalf of the board. And so we typically have a wide range of individuals, whether they serve in fiscal services or maybe a curriculum role or maybe a school leadership role, whatever it might be. And so every closed session, pretty much from October through June, we meet with the board in confidential closed session to talk about bargaining. The board lets us know what their interests are. Here's what we'd like you to offer for salary. And we share back with them. Here's what the unions would like you to provide to them. And so we sort of get that information from the board directly. Then I have a chief negotiator that the board is, again, in the non-unit group. And Mr. Thornburg's our chief negotiator. He negotiates on behalf of the board with all 3 associations. He will go back. And so this sort of goes back and forth. But it's important to know because ultimately the board president signs on behalf of the board when we reach an agreement on salary, on compensation, on benefits, on working conditions, whatever it is. There's a wonderful list on our website that I might point you to if you're interested in learning more about what the state of Maryland says around collective bargaining, because there are mandatory subject to bargaining, things that we have to bargain, we cannot unilaterally change. That's sort of a great example around the conversations that have happened publicly around the cameras. Cameras are a working condition, which is a mandatory subject of bargaining in the state of Maryland. So the board can't unilaterally make a decision. It has to be done with the associations. So that's a great sort of example of that. But then there are other things that are illegal subjects of bargaining that they've said, for example, class size. We don't bargain class sizes with the associations. There are things like classification. If we decide that we want to have a particular role type, do a certain type of job, our job descriptions are not bargained. We are able to do that as an organization. And so there are some really interesting things there, but we spend a lot of time with the board in closed session to really execute the interests of the board and the will of the board around what you want your collective bargaining agreements to look like.
Are employees required to join these?
No, there's a decision by the Supreme Court called the Janus decision. Yeah, so the Janus decision really laid that out. It wasn't specific to the public education sector, but they can sort of have a representation fee. I'll be honest with you, we find that most people join with the exception of FACE. FACE has the largest percentage proportionally of non-union members. I think, for example, it might be somewhere around 40%. So, and that's just sort of an interesting thing. As you talk to people, it's not that they don't want the representation. I think a lot of our perhaps lower paid employees struggle with paying the union fees, right? Exactly. So they have some representation fees, but no, it is not a requirement for them.
They'll still get representation
Correct.
from the union in any kind of actions, but, yeah.
Right,
That's,
exactly.
I don't remember if it was in Virginia or not that was the case, but it was like if you were not part of the union, you wouldn't get whatever the union negotiated. So their salaries would go up if they were.
Oh, is that right?
I don't remember if it was in Virginia specifically, but it was, yeah, like if you weren't part of the union, whoever was would do whatever they negotiated and you wouldn't. It's like, good lord.
Wow.
We'll do that here.
Not at all, not at all.
40%
They all get it.
of face, about 40% of face don't.
That was the last number I heard, but I mean, don't,
Is like handled.
And then,
hold on, Ms. Monier, she's, sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
is the board allowed to negotiate different contracts, like?
There are 3 separate ones, but there's something particularly around salary called the Me Too provision, which has been written in, we inherited this language, it's been here for a while. So the Me Too provision says that basically, and it's sort of a bit of a triangle, to be honest with you, so it's not that they all have Me Too with each other, it's like this one has it with that one, and that one has it with that one, so it's all connected. So essentially, to answer your question very sort of clearly, the board can bargain something different for FACE, but FACASA and FCTA have Me Too language. So whatever percent proportion we do for one, the other must receive the same proportion. But FACE, it can be done differently.
Like a different union type, could you bring in a different?
No, we have no involvement in the right to organize, so that's completely led by employees. There is some language around how many employee associations can be. So I think it's like up to 5, and so some school systems have more, they've carved this out differently, but this is pretty typical for most public school systems to have about 3 associations.
You could bring in others and give.
We have no involvement in the bringing in, the employees would have to pursue that.
Association.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's up to the employees, so right now, MSCA is for most of the state. Baltimore Teachers Union is an affiliate of AFT.
I'm making
So
notes.
they're the only ones because they tend to be urban. AFT, American Federation of Teachers, tends to cover the urban areas, so that's Baltimore Teachers Union, they're separate. They do work together, but the rest are affiliates of NEA, but that's been a decision.
We're not allowed to weigh in on that, I think is the bottom line. We have to work with whomever they've selected, is basically.
And that's in law, like they are the legal people to do that. Other counties have SEIU, some of their employees are part of that. PGCEA, like is all lumped together.
Yes, Mr. Fultz.
That's a question, please. This happened in other counties. Are the teachers, and I know the union is the one that negotiates with the non-union team. And this is in other school systems' language, the teacher can personally negotiate with the.
No.
That does not exist?
No. And the non-unit group do not have a contract and do not have a collective bargaining agreement. Those 100 employees, they do not have a contract. They are not.
And like, oh gosh, I don't. You did a pretty good job of explaining.
So I'm gonna go on to this item, but if you have another question.
I'm good.
No, this one's mine. This one's mine.
Did you do?
About the appeals and how we handle them. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, you go ahead. I thought it was mine.
No, go ahead. Go for it, Karen.
We're getting jurisdictional here. So this back to the quasi judicial, the appeal and hearing process. You can read the education article there, annotated Code of Maryland. And so here are some of the topics. The superintendent's decision per policy 105, what's 105?
Appeals and hearing
Just
procedures.
appeal, thank you, sorry. I'm like, I don't have them all memorized. I talked about suspensions. Yeah, we get them for student placements. That's one that'll come up. You know, my child's having trouble at this school. Can they go to this school? And if it's been denied by the superintendent, then the board looks at it. I don't think I've heard any transportation eligibility decisions, but that's one. You see the certain student services determinations and other matters. So typically it's teachers, students, That's typically what it is.
Most of the appeals are employment action related, or they are related to student discipline. I would say that's the overwhelming majority.
Yeah, and a lot of times some of them, you're working on it and it works itself out. Others go on and on and on.
Yeah.
This is yours.
Yes.
This one?
Yes,
I
yes,
thought,
and then I have
no,
the
this isn't mine.
I'll take this one, no
Yeah, 'cause
worries,
I
no
thought
worries.
it was-
Is,
Take that one.
Ben,
Dr. Sergo to
Yeah,
take
go
this one.
ahead, Dr. Sergo.
you all do the manifestation determination if it's an IEP student. Do you do that within 10 days? Is that by law? Does Dr. Bingaman initiate that, or just Mr.
The manifestation IEP meeting is held at the school level with the school IEP team.
We don't hear, the board does not hear this.
So Dr. Bingaman's not there, and Mr. Keller or
Sometimes.
Okay, so
Yeah, it depends.
coordinators may go.
So the coordinators.
Okay, coordinators may go.
Circumstance.
The manifestation determination triggers that federal law that you have to have a meeting within 10 days, right?
Always.
Okay, that's basically my
And
question.
we have a dashboard to monitor our compliance.
Okay, do you know, does the state count the weekends as days for the Comar?
I believe they're business,
All business, okay.
It's school days.
usually it's school days.
So I think this is probably the one everyone in this room knows really well because it's a lot of what we spend our time on. But essentially, this is about the financial stewardship. And so Ms. Claybaugh, who will do a more in-depth review of this with those elected to the board in the fall around the budget. But essentially, it's about, most of the money, 86 cents on the dollar, is really tied up in employee salary and benefits. That's mostly where our funds are allocated. That just sort of talks about how we do it. A lot of the accounting, and I know we've had really elaborate conversations, it's a great example of the many masters, is that we have different ways that we have to report our financial information, but all of this information is part of what we work with with the board. Just in terms of the next slide,
Yeah. Go back a second. Where's the food?
where's the food? The food is in its own category.
Yes.
It's self-funded.
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 Yeah, and we're proud of that. We've been
Who
able to.
determines that contract?
Federal, USDA.
You're saying that,
US
you're saying that the Frederick system does not have any choice in who chooses the food vendors?
In terms of how are you talking about what's served in the
Food vendors come before the
cafeteria?
board.
Yeah.
They serve it with what they serve, who serves it, where does the food come from, who prepares it, who contracts with them, what's it cost?
We're asking a whole lot of
So
different
that's it. I thought you were
questions.
asking about food services budget. Are you asking about how the monies are spent in food services?
When a child eats the food, where's the food come from, and how did it get there, and who paid for it, and who decided where that food came from? And the reason why I'm asking for it, asking about it, is because I'm wondering if Frederick, who are the agricultural community in Frederick, if they are growing food here, do they get preferential, treatment to procure, food from farmers or from businesses and so forth?
I sort of, for the purposes of our meeting today, from a budget perspective, USDA and Frederick Food Services are self-funded. All of those other nuances you shared, I would feel more comfortable having those conversations be answered by someone in procurement and food services because I don't know the answers to those questions directly.
Those vendors do come before the board.
Does anybody remember, I'm sorry, Dr. Dusty, Sue Johnson, when she was president, she is very involved in the agricultural community, and I grew up in Middletown, and basically she said that the reason why local farmers can't give milk to us is because the USDA won't allow 2%, and our stuff like South Mountain Creamery and whatever is more 2%, and they
Well, this
won't.
got changed.
Yeah,
and-
Did it? Okay, then I take that.
Came up
I
with-
retract.
Yep, no, that just got changed. That was a big deal at the ag legislative.
Oh, really?
Let me just
Right.
ask one final question. With all the brain power in here, does anyone know if there's a written policy, okay, which says that Frederick County, that agricultural people, that business people here get any preferred contract if there's no difference in budget or cost or anything like that? Is there any written policy?
Blackett talked in Mountain Farm, we talk apples all the time. He grows a smaller apple specifically for our schools. We
USDA
love-
governs that.
Is there a
love
written-
to get-
Is there a written policy?
It's federal. It's driven by the federal government. It's not a local board policy.
The answer is no. Okay.
Yeah, it's federal.
Believe me, one of my projects in grad school was transportation,
Right.
the largest county in FDA, so it was like, whoa, this is a bad problem. This isn't my.
I was just gonna finish out the yeah, see, budget's such a hot topic, particularly right now. And those are great questions. I think because a lot of people don't understand that the food services is sort of its own entity as it relates to USDA. But in terms of the budget process, you know, we have a bit of a wonky schedule that is really not guided by us, which is that sort of we have the budget is first developed by the superintendent. That process starts in the fall, talking to stakeholders, talking to staff, talking to community members. Superintendent develops that budget. We then build that budget off of our enrollment projections because, as you know, and the funds that we receive are primarily driven on a per pupil count. And then we turn that budget over to the board. And the superintendent turns that over in the winter, late January, typically early February, and then it becomes the board's budget. And most of the active work that you're familiar with and that you see and that is occurring now is in the period of time when it's become the board's budget. It's been submitted to the county executive. County executive releases her budget in April, usually April 15th. Then the county council can only add to her budget. They cannot reduce what she's allocated to the school system, but they can add up to what we've received because we've received our full funding.
They can't just add, they have to reallocate.
Correct. And so then after that, the board looks at what the current projections are, what we were allocated, what we need, and works to balance the budget. While we are also bargaining with our associations, because of course, a big part of that budget is salary and compensation and benefits. All that's happening sort of all at the same time in the month of May. And then by June, they have to have an approved budget, which has to be signed and delivered. Did you want to add anything, Dr. Dacey, to that? Okay.
No. I mean, it says October, but it's really year-round.
Pretty much.
So, same question about the policy, like trying to limit things. Is there also kind of a watchdog or oversight group that's looking at programs or software that's not used or justified to like moonlight those things?
In terms of programs or software,
What's included in the budget?
I mean in the
Yeah,
budget?
yeah. So like, for example, like, you know, let's say in the social studies department, we get a subscription to like iCivics or something, and we've had it for 10 years, but like no one's touching it, right? And it feels like oftentimes we just keep rebuying those same things, and then somebody else wants a different one, and then somebody else wants a different one, and you're only using like one part of like this complicated collective software or program. And one of the things I was talking about in our call the other night is, you know, instead of looking at those and saying like, hey, these need to be moonlit or we don't need to justify these, there's this idea of you do not have because you do not ask. So every teacher needs to write to justify, I want this, I need this, whatever. And we're not really collectively looking at what's being used, is it for the benefit? Because at the school level, we're fighting for our lives down there just to get anything, you know, but maybe that hasn't been touched for like 5 years.
So part of, if you go back to the previous slide, that public and staff engagement is Ms. Claybaugh and her staff meeting with every department in central
doing that.
office. It used to be when we came, budget was sort of the wish list, what I want, and let me prioritize those three. But with the implementation of Blueprint and the requirements there, we do not have that luxury. And with the fact that while we're plateauing a bit, we are still growing. So we have to make sure the resources we have are the appropriate ones. So part of Blueprint is highly qualified instructional materials. So that causes us to audit what we're using and even question whether or not we need it. So one of the questions I asked this year, did they say we have to implement it next year? Or can we say we're gonna delay? Part of that too is about workload, because we're constantly implementing new curriculum, and every time we do that, we impact the collective efficacy of our teachers, right?
And that was the other part too.
Disarm them of the strategies that they know work,
Yep.
and then they gotta start all over again.
And same with those new softwares, right? You're using, you know, different, like Power School or whatever, Blackboard or something. and
Yeah,
then-
we're trying to collapse them. We're doing
We
a
are.
new rollout of Power School, new SIS, and so we also try to renegotiate existing contracts if it's something we know we have to do. So
But we
Blueprint.
also have to look at the regulations around technology. What can we use? We have guardrails that are provided to us around that. But also our board members are very sharp in asking us tons of questions, and some of those are just that. You know, do we need this right now, or can we use it for something else? And so we always try to answer those questions to the best of our ability and post those questions so that the public can see what the board is asking and what the response
I
is.
think, and yeah, I won't take up any more of the time with that. It's just that exact thing of transparency of, folks want to know what are we using our $1 billion on, and especially when it comes to moonlighting those things that are not being used.
Yeah, absolutely.
Softwares with, Chromebooks and whether we're using the Google Suite and whatever comes with that.
Right.
Where can we limit that to get back to pen and paper, things like that, so.
Yeah.
Question. But since you bring up Blueprint, I'm wondering how is the board involved with Blueprint? Where are you all with Blueprint, and where does the board come in?
Well, that is one of those things that we probably talked about before you came here, because Blueprint is law. So, if you, I know you're campaigning, you're thinking about, the governance of the board, there's a lot going on right now that actually takes the local rights away because they're governed. They're already instituted in law, and there's not much you can do. And if the board doesn't approve Blueprint expenditures, we could lose 25% of our state funding. That is the caveat. So you don't implement, you lose it. And you can see that we're always looking for more money to fund the things, right? Because we try to keep the programs that we know work for our students here in Frederick. But between Maryland State Department of Education's literacy policy, math policy, and their strategic plan, the AIB, the board is really limited as to where it's very little autonomy for them.
And I think.
Less and less every.
Less and
And
less.
less and less every year.
I mean, it's some things that you used to think were gonna always be protected, like school calendar's always been a local decision. And now the state board's like, no, everybody has to have a calendar that ends on by the same date and things like that. There's a lot of places where we have and they have us, financially, they have us sort of in a corner. We have to have the starting teacher salary be $60,000 by July 1. And there's no waiver for that. We can't get around that obligation. We have to have every student who wants access take a dual enrollment course at our cost. We have to pay FCC in order to accredit our teachers or theirs to teach the students who want access. We don't get to.
We did get that limited to 2.
Two courses, but it's still.
That was like a year of advocacy.
Yes.
We get,
In order to get the law changed.
Right.
That line item's $3.5 million. So there's things that we don't get a choice about what to pay for. And I think in terms of there's a whole, if you click on the website, that's the body of work that I'm also responsible for. There's a ton of information about Blueprint that I try to put out there with transparency. But I've had my own little sidebar about, I feel that there's some things that we're being asked of that are in conflict with other local interests, that are in conflict with collective bargaining agreements and all kinds of things, but it sort of falls on deaf ears, I'll be honest with you.
This kind of sounds like a lot of people in here are legal experts. That's what it sounds like to me, but I know that you're not proclaiming yourself to be, but when it comes to the law, when it comes to things, I mean, the federal government says marijuana is illegal, you can buy it right down the street. What law you comply with, what you choose not to comply with. Who was, it sounded like the general counsel that advised you on 443 was just like a rotating general counsel. I don't know, my daughter's a lawyer. Could she advise?
Well, we're not going to get,
I don't wanna
we don't
get
have
into that,
time
but
to
that's
get
not
down to
true.
that, that's not true.
I just would,
We're
I
happy
just
to
would,
discuss that with
I just would rather that people not be so, like they're concluding that, yes, we have to comply with this law. If we don't do this, like, absolutely, you're not gonna get funding. Like, you are an expert.
It's not about our expertise, they've actually told us that directly.
Yeah.
So we've been told by the Maryland State Department of Education and the Maryland Legislature that if we don't comply, they can withhold our funding up to 25%.
You've been intimidated.
And they've done it. They've actually
It's in law, it's written in law. It says it in law.
They've done it.
That actually goes into one of my questions too. How often do you guys get to negotiate with them or the state or, these higher powers that be, and maybe you in Washington County or Carroll County agree on something, you're like, hey, we're gonna stand our ground here and put our heels in the sand and say, we're not gonna budge on this because this is wrong for our county, and push back on the state?
Then you get laws passed that can have your county name.
Yeah, so can you sue the state as a county?
Here's what I would say about Blueprint. There's tremendous collective concern by school systems. We leverage our influence to the greatest extent possible. I have bi-weekly meetings for all Blueprint coordinators with with MSDE, with the AIB. Ms. Claybaugh has bi-weekly meetings with all the CFOs across the state about all the concerns that we have. I would say that our influence is limited. And if you track the legislature, I think that's represented in a reluctance to significantly adjust aspects of the legislation. And the AIB has pretty significant plenary authority to make determinations. And so I think that is not necessarily the role of staff, but it is the role of the board to advocate and to influence. And we try to do that by working with our delegation, by doing what, all the different things. Right. State organizations.
Dr. Dysons and PZAM and MAPE work very closely together.
We presented 30 recommendations last year
Of ways to change the
of
blueprint.
ways to modify Blueprint. And what we got was the guidance limiting the number of courses for dual enrollment to 4 a year instead of however many anybody wanted.
And to your point, school systems that did not comply with aspects of the law last year, and I don't know that it was from any willful disobedience, but those who couldn't make a certain metric or couldn't get there, all got warning letters that were issued that said they were going to withhold their funding as a result. They're allowed to withhold up to 25% of funding.
Do the board members have like a legal immunity? If they make a decision that hurts someone and someone sues,
Well,
are they
Someone
immune?
sues the board?
What?
If someone sues the board? I'm not sure.
Sue them all. Does the board have legal immunity as a government employee? You don't know?
I'm gonna
not sure I understand your
say,
question.
let's get back to this. We have other questions like that are outside. I'm sorry.
Just super quick, do
What?
we know what percentage we are at implementing the blueprint so far in FCPS? What percentage?
Yeah, so we've met every metric that's been placed in front of us. We've not missed a deadline, and we've not missed an expectation. So we're at 100% compliance for the existing requirements of the blueprint law.
And how far in progression is that to 100% implementation?
Well, it depends, because they keep changing where the goalpost is. So
Roughly.
we have different measures that come up every year. So for example, by July 1 of this year, we have to be at the 60,000. That's our next target that we have to hit. We have another target that's due in September around a career counseling MOU that has to be updated. So there's sort of different, it's sort of, there's like an iterative process, and in spring of 2027, we will have to provide a phase 3 of the blueprint update on our implementation plan, of which we've not been told at all what that must include. But every hurdle or milestone we have to meet, we've hit with 100% compliance.
If they did
Janie
something
gives
that
everybody
they,
the AIBs.
if there was a line in the sand that you said, no, this is not okay for our children, we can't do this,
No.
would you consider suing the state?
That is not a decision of the staff.
That would be up to the board.
That's a board
Yeah, that would be up to the board.
Have you ever considered suing?
It's so much money, so much time, and in the process, we still have to be doing all the things we have to do, and then maybe down the line it gets tossed out. So, no, that, I haven't personally, it hasn't ever come up in discussion. I mean, if you want to bang your head against the wall and waste a lot of money and time, is how I see it. That's why you go through your legislators, because it's their fight to fight. That's because it's on the law. So I'm going to say, let's get through this slide. We only have 2 slides left, because you were right, the other one was mine, but this is your slide.
Oh, so this is just, again, when those of you are elected to the board, you'll get a full briefing from Dr. Leba on the CIP, which is a completely separate budget. So a lot of times people say budget, they sort of conflate the operating budget with the capital budget. This is actually a completely separate process, but that in June, when you hear about the EFMP, that was a mouthful, talks about the long-range planning around capital projects. We have a very close relationship with the county government around that sort of shared funding obligation. There is a state agency called the IAC, which is the agency that oversees and allocates funding, and then the board essentially approves that plan annually. So that's just sort of a big picture overview of the CIP process, but it's just important to know is it's a separate, completely separate budget process when it comes to facilities.
Quick, the property tax increase we got about 1.5 years ago that went to the schools, is that, and it was for
Brunswick High School.
the building of, does that go into this budget?
Well,
Depends on what you,
Renovation.
Right,
of
so
existing schools.
it's a Hillcrest, there
Yeah,
are two
Hillcrest
schools
and
that are
Tunbridge.
getting renovations, help to pay for that.
And does it go into this fund?
It's its own separate
It's its
fund.
own separate 'cause the county
It's
keeps
only
it.
going to aging infrastructure,
Yeah.
not new seats.
It doesn't sit with us.
Doesn't sit with us.
How do you access that information?
We,
How to
Dr.
access the
Lebo and his
information,
team,
yeah.
they work with the county's team, and they decide on those projects
I
together.
think she wants to know where you access the information.
Oh, the information.
I think that would be on the
That's good. They,
county
like, if I
website.
Yeah,
wanted.
it'd be with the
Yes,
county.
yes.
You'll see Janice Spiegel is at every board meeting.
Right,
She's our representative from the county.
Yeah.
I have an weird athletic question, because we raised the fees, and basically now the streaming system and the football here is so good. Like technically, Dr. Dice, I don't know if anyone told you, you are the superintendent of Western Maryland football. That should be your title. So what I'm getting at is, can we technically trademark our high school football and have the streaming system and the ticket sales, and that money go to pay for individuals' athletic fee on a sliding scale? Or would that, we'd have to ask permission to MPSSA?
So we fall under the state's MPSSA. We fall under them, so they may be trademarked, but I don't think we can do that ourselves.
Yeah, where's my subscription money going to?
They coordinate all of that
I
filming,
would love,
taping,
I would love.
state championship money,
Would be great.
all that.
We are at the hour-ish point, so I'm going to thank everybody for coming.
I got a question.
I can hang out a minute longer, but we're going to let staff go.